Got it.
Stan?
I got it, Gary.
Stan can't find the damn button.
I got the Zoom. Stan, don't worry about it.
There are two people's recording. Both the host and the co-host are both recording, but not the anonymous coward.
He does it anonymously and cowardly. All right. Let's see. Okay, we're recording. This is Thursday, February the 18th, 2021. This is the monthly meeting of the St. Louis Linux User Group, also known as the STLLUG. This month, our main featured speaker is Michael Carrington of SUSE, and he'll be with us in a minute. And let's see, for those of you who haven't been in our meetings for a while or before at all, we're a no membership dues free group. So anyone can join, anyone's welcome to come to the meetings. We've never had to worry about a particular conduct policy, so hopefully everyone just is going to behave professionally. So the way we usually structure this Thursday night meeting is before we have our main presentation, we kind of have general announcements and general Q&A. Just if anybody's got a, hey, I tried this, it did that, it didn't work. Anybody got any suggestions? Those kind of things. So before we get to, and then after that, we have our featured speaker of the evening. So let's see, with that, announcements. Let's see, it's cold, it's snowy. No. Let's see, Stan, Lee, either of you have any particular big announcements?
Next week is the newcomer Linux user group. I'd like to point out that, was it yesterday, Gary? I almost gave myself a heart attack. Was that yesterday or the day before? I can't remember.
I think it was the day before.
Yeah, I couldn't get into my password vault. And the only passwords I could remember were the 4 computers I have in my house and the password to our system up on where www.STLLUG.org is hosted, along with all our websites. As it turned out, I was using the wrong password, because the password that I have for my security vault is sort of similar to the one for my main workstation, and it's all, at this point, it's all muscle memory, and I was using the wrong muscle, and it wasn't, and apparently it wasn't the muscle between my ears.
That was going to be my next question.
So I went through 4 backup copies of the password vault, and none of them were working. I was really upset. So it happens all the time.
Which made me think, it's like, yeah, we probably all should think through. There's that fine line between keeping the perfect amount of security so that people can't get to your password vault. And then there's the, oh my God, I've locked myself out of my password vault. Which is why you should always copy all of your passwords onto little yellow posties and stick them on the back of your monitor.
Especially important ones like for your password vault. Right. No one would ever want that one.
Of course not.
No, that's why you should send them off in a letter to yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, but that costs money.
Isn't Gmail free?
On the subject of security, one of my banks has decided that they want to annoy me and force me to exchange a cookie with them when I log on from a workstation that they've never seen before. Are they really, I mean, that's the rest of the other bank and the stockbroker and whatever, they don't do that. Just this one bank.
How do you know
Are
it's
you-
a cookie, Stanford?
What was the question, Lee?
How do you know it's a cookie?
I'm pretty sure it is. Actually, I should back it up and say, for one of the banks, first they asked me my user name, then they asked me my password. Then if they don't recognize the device, they ask me a rotating series of questions that I have pre-answered.
Oh,
And then it saves the cookie. The other bank, the one that's annoying me, says when they don't recognize my device, then they want to either email me or text me a code that I have to type in.
Yeah, a lot of them do that.
And it's like, no, just ask me for one of those prearranged numbers that we talked about. I'm not interested in getting any. I'm not interested in talking to you right now.
well, at Stanford,
I don't want to stop what I'm doing and go retrieve something that you sent me and send it back to you.
it's called two-factor authentication. It's one of the most common security procedures out there today that are reasonably good.
Give me why is it like I said, I think I have 2 or 3 different financial institutions. They're the most annoying about it. And you can understand that because once you get in there, you're talking real money.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's not a cookie because if I log into my main bank on one browser and then I switch to another browser, it still recognizes the machine. What they're trapping is the MAC address. And that MAC address uniquely identifies that piece of hardware. And if you've been there before, then they know that that is a private machine that you are okay to use, that you have accepted as a reasonable risk to use at their bank.
So you're saying that after you do whatever handshaking is necessary to authenticate your machine, then they are storing your MAC address associated with your username and password rather than sending you a cookie that authenticates the machine.
Correct, because cookies can be cleared. Cookies can be easily deleted. And the other thing is they're not going to save that MAC address unless you click the Remember Me box after you log in. That prevents them from authenticating a machine that you have not blessed, like you're in a library or an airport or an internet cafe or something.
You know more about it than I do. That fits the one bank, the other bank that's asking me the rotating questions. I know that when I clear my cookies, a rotating question. If I don't clear the cookie, they don't ask the rotating question.
Well, that could be their procedure. It's more common to save your MAC address because you can't clear that. That is a unique identifier for your machine. It's also how TeamViewer keeps track of what machines you're using.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I'll have to think about that. I mean, is that? Okay. I mean,
it's for the average Muggle, the MAC address is permanent. You can change it.
Yeah, because it's my ISP's MAC address, right? I mean, that's the.
No, not IP address. Your MAC address. The address on the NIC you're talking to.
Oh, so if I go to a different computer in the house, it's going to ask me the question again.
Right. Because in that case, you wouldn't have a known MAC address or a cookie. But like I say, it's more common to use a MAC address because they can't be spoofed unless you've installed Mac Changer on your Linux box.
Now here's a question for you. I have, for whatever reason, the last time I rebooted, the onboard wireless conked out. So I plugged in a wireless stub because I didn't feel like rebooting. And
Okay.
I've been up for 79 days or whatever. Which MAC address is it going to grab?
It's going to grab the one on that new interface. Because that's
It's
the one
going to
you're
grab the MAC address behind the IP address that it's talking to.
correct. Which is different between the built-in Wi-Fi and the plugged-in Wi-Fi.
How do they get access to my MAC address?
When you hit the browser, it's part of your headers.
That,
Use
I mean,
what people are saying.
I should know that the whole 7-layer model thing and stuff like that. I mean, because you're right, I'm going through my local router, and then I'm going, everything in the house is leaving on my ISP's IP address. But you're saying that at a different one of the 7 layers, there's a MAC packet with an IP packet wrapped around it.
Right. It's part of the initial handshake. If you can't ignore it, but a lot of people don't, because it's a unique way of identifying the interface you're talking through, which is almost always associated with the computer you're on.
So I need to take a wireless stub, authenticate that against my bank, and then carry that stub in my pocket at all times when I go to the library.
That would
I like it.
But since the Windows machines are locked down, I don't know if they'd let you use it.
No, I mean, I'm being somewhat facetious, but
Well, what you should have is a VPN. If you're that security conscious, then the MAC address that is seen is the one of your VPN endpoint, which is software controlled. I better not dig myself too deep a hole.
Well, this is Stan. I thought the JavaScript of the browser would go in and look at your MAC address and pull that.
Yeah, it can. There's a number of ways to pull it.
Ooh, Gary's showing his screen.
Bigger, Gary, a couple times, 2 or 3. Fill the screen.
we'll let that drop for now, and maybe I'll report
World
back next
Penguin
month
Day.
on what I discussed with the bank.
Don't waste your brain cells, Stanford. It's not you'll never get through to anybody that knows a MAC address from an apple, an edible apple, or an orange. Now you have no access to those folks. If you don't like it, go to a different bank.
Okay. Did I just screw up?
No, you're fine.
You guys seeing the WW post or?
Yeah.
Annual second.
Oh. Okay.
But by the way, if anybody has a small size on the screen, if you look at your Zoom video settings, one of the top one should be Zoom, and you can go up to 500%. 150 on Gary's screen is full screen on a 24-inch monitor. In this case,
So where does this show up, Lee?
in your view options, normally it's the right-hand side of the floating bar that's over the.
Oh, I see it.
If you had view options, the top one is zoom ratio.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gary, go ahead.
No problem. By way of announcements, and this is kind of a dumb announcement, but radio is kind of the predecessor to the internet. So before we could stream stuff, you just had to listen to it on radio or television. But the second radio station in the United States was here in St. Louis. The station still exists. It's WEW. At the time it was started by St. Louis University. And this April the 26th, will be the 100th anniversary of the second radio station in the United States starting. So, and so far, I don't know of any particular celebration, but maybe some of us who've done stuff in that area might get together and pull some type of celebration together. It's a little over 2 months away. So if anybody wants to participate, now's your chance. So,
Where was
Who
the
would
first
be-
radio
who would be
station,
number
Gary?
one? WABC in New York?
I believe it was somewhere in Pennsylvania, I think. Was it outside of Philadelphia or Pittsburgh? And that's
It
just,
was KDKA in Philadelphia.
thank you. Who said that? Rich?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I
KDKA.
did not hear what Rich said. He was talking into his sock.
Probably wearing a mask so he doesn't contaminate us.
That's it. That's it. So,
And
it
W-
was kind of a neat story down at St. Louis U. 1921, you're just coming out of World War I. St. Louis U had gotten a bunch of radio equipment from I believe it was the Coast Guard, I think, had paid for it as part of research into doing things with radio for the war effort. And after the war, the U.S. government wasn't interested in it anymore. It was like they were like, oh, whatever, we'll just leave it right there at the university. Y'all do something with it. And so one of the professors in the geophysics department or geophysics department figured, hey, we're going to turn it into a transmitter. And they first started doing Morse code on it, doing the transmit of weather and seismic reports, and then they figured out how to convert it over to voice. So anyway, that's enough of that. Other things coming up interesting. Anybody? Or
What about today, Gary?
oh well, yeah. Yes. Today there was a rover that actually landed on Mars, and that is significant for us computer people because it was 11 light minutes between here and Mars. So if you wanted to send it a command, it took 11 minutes for that command to get there. So yeah, basically the programming had to be right because you didn't have a whole lot of chance to fix something once things started going wrong. So, and the little lander landed and it did well.
And it was the biggest rover they've landed. It was the most cameras they've landed. It was the first rover that is designed to collect samples for return to Earth. And it was also a test of the systems that would carry a manned module when that happened. Landing systems.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard that they called FedEx for a pickup, but that the delivery truck won't be there until 2032.
I think it was 2026.
Oh, that's only 6 years. To me, it seemed like it was like 10 years out or something.
I thought it was 2038.
Yeah, it's like way out there.
Well, it depends on
The end of the epoch.
It depends on whether Mr. Musk and his competitors get the incentive to go pick it up.
There are some other, and for those of you who don't know, this is STLLUG's calendar. We try and put anything of a technical nature. It used to be only the in-town, all the things on this calendar were in-town meetings, but with COVID and the fact that even in-town meetings are now remote, we've kind of been trying to shift it to things that we think people with a background in open standards, open software, Linux would be interested in. So we try and put things like that on here. And we put a few historically significant things in as well. For instance, 55 years ago, 2 Gemini astronauts lost their life at Lambert Airport. They were here because this is where the Gemini capsules were built, and they crashed their plane into the side of the building at McDonald where they were building the capsule. So 30th anniversary of Python. I never think of the language as being that old, but it's that old. So. Anyway, you can go through here, and if anybody has anything particular they want to point out, by all means do, but otherwise we're going to move on. Hearing nothing. Anybody got any other general Q&A, things that they just wanted to ask a question about? We can also do that afterwards. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to our main speaker of the evening. Michael Carrington is, I believe the title is software engineer for SUSE. And he actually supports the storage systems area. And he knows a lot about all kinds of things that SUSE is doing. So
it's 7 o'clock.
And sorry about that. That's my talkative computer telling me what time it is. Michael has done 2 other presentations for us in about the last year. And we always enjoy having him. And sometimes he brings some other folks from SUSE along as speaker. And so he's always very informative. And we are very happy to have him tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Hey, thanks. It's good to be here as always. Sorry we can't be enjoying some of that fine Italian cuisine there in St. Louis. And Gary, I will say that I tried to extend the life of my Linux beard through this quarantine, and I couldn't do what you've got going. That is absolutely phenomenal. I'm at awe and jealous on the Linux beard. But yeah, it's been an interesting quarter to say the least. You mentioned my title as software engineer. I've had that title in the past, but I'm actually a partner sales engineer officially now. I am not a storage sales engineer any longer, and that was 7-8 months ago that happened. But to update everyone, and I know Chip's here as well, and he already knows the fun news. But SUSE Enterprise Storage has decided that they are no longer going to support the storage in Ceph as a supported product with updates within SUSE. So with that said, our support for SES 7 is until January 31st of 2023. And the support contracts, if they are written and listed past that or anything, will go beyond that. But there has been a move away from Ceph as a profitable business, and it was due to the fact that every time we release a version, with it being 5 or 5.5 and then 6 and then 7, as Ceph has evolved and the different technology has evolved, so have the commands and the deployment methods and the procedures within it. And it has become a support kind of not nightmare, but you have to pay for the people that know it at the expertise on each version. And the powers that be decided that this is not a profitable thing, especially when we have just acquired. And that's the other part of the news since we last spoke. And when was that, Gary? 6 months ago, right? So August, we'll say. Anyway, we've officially acquired Rancher Labs. And so I know there's plenty of questions on the Ceph and SUSE Enterprise Storage and maybe some choice words from Chip. But we are also doing the Rancher Labs thing, and that is kind of the pendulum has switched in that we're going to support SUSE Linux Enterprise. We're going to support the management of clusters with Suma. and we're going to do containerization in the Gartner, the best quadrant in Gartner, with our acquisition of Rancher Labs. So it's pretty neat what we're doing, and what we've acquired and the technology there. The idea is to get it all to run on SUSE Linux Enterprise, and that's the goal there on the long-term horizon. But as for now, the support of our Ceph-based solution, and basically what my job was for 2 years, is no longer going to be a product from SUSE. So I can open it up for questions. That's really what I was going to come to talk about. I can speak to Rancher and talk to you about the powers of how it can handle any different Kubernetes cluster, whether it's in a different cloud, private cloud, personal cloud, across the spectrum, small Raspberry Pi cluster, as long as it is a CNCF certified Kubernetes cluster. Rancher Labs can manage it, and so you can have a central repository to do your work, whether that's computing, using resources throughout your organization and off hours, whether that's doing other things within your application and making it cloud friendly, and the ability to scale with microservices, right? I know that's a huge hot topic, and it's pretty evident that 50% of technology groups, I think, are going to adopt it in the next year. Is what we're looking at, I think, is the statistic there. So I think it's a
are we going to adopt what?
Kubernetes and microservicing and like containerization.
Okay.
So overall changing of a monolithic architecture to something that can be run in the cloud, basically, because cloud pricing is pretty good for CPU and server time, right? And it's instantaneous and geographically dispersed, and for majority of industry, that's what we need, right?
And we can't lose our password vault there.
No, and I would to the gentleman, I didn't catch his name, I'm sorry, that was talking about two-factor authentication. At my role before this, I actually pissed off a bunch of devs. I was the Linux engineer at Bats Global Markets, and we had to, for SEC rule, restrict production environments to two-factor authentication. So I hooked in our Windows, had key fob, the secure ID, and RSA token, and I ran some, did the puppet code to roll it out, but tested everything and rolled out a two-factor authentication to production for an entire stock exchange. And that to me is pretty important to have two-factor authentication, but two-factor authentication is something that, like, I don't necessarily need on my Nintendo Switch, but I know my kids, even if they know my password, aren't going to hack it because they don't have my thumbprint, right? So I like it. I think it's important. One thing I did learn, Gary, and this is something that I find unique, is when you talk about two factors, it's not two separate factors. It's something you are, something you know, or something you have, right? So if two of those three factors, make sure you're authenticated, whether it's a password, and then if you have a key fob or something that has a different code. So the security industry is unique. There's a lot of tight security. I know you've seen, especially in the news recently, the hacking that is going on during the last November cycle of our election, and even on day-to-day attacks, it goes on. I have a good friend that works for one of those three-letter organizations that it's always fun to catch up with, hear stories with. And it's like two-factor authentication. It's become so easy with a smartphone. We should all be doing it just for the simple fact that we're securing our own accounts. So I maybe I went way too far on my soapbox there, Gary, and I apologize if I have ruffled any of you St. Louis folks, but that's at least how I feel in Kansas City.
No, no problem. No problem. Like I say,
Fine. Yeah. We already know you're crazy being in Kansas City.
Hey, I grew up in Phoenix, right? So like Kansas City is, especially with that negative, what we got -13 one night.
oh,
Yeah, we didn't have that growing up in Phoenix. I think we got my dad's bird bath out back froze like 3 or 4 times in my childhood.
wow.
So yeah, no, but this Midwest thing, it's pretty neat. What do you guys think of? Can I open it to everyone about containerization and taking it from a traditional monolithic 3-tiered maybe architecture, and how you might go about doing that and put it into microservices? Or what do you want to do, Gary?
Not to just derail you off that, but hold that thought. I think we probably do want to get to that. But your opening comments here about SUSE storage stuff. So what's SUSE's recommended direction then? I mean, what functionality is being deprecated, and what is SUSE recommending to replace that? How should we proceed?
Well, how is SUSE, or in my personal opinion? I guess it's being recorded, so I should say on behalf of SUSE. The I'm disappointed, Gary. I've spent 2 years. I'll be honest. I'll be frank. I know this is. I spent 2 years going around through the channel, through these events, getting people excited about it, understanding the cost benefit of it, and really getting it to make sense. And I got customers that were close, that were in process, that have just gone into production and live with what I've talked to them about. So it's something that I'm sitting here thinking, all right, that hurts, because we're not going to be there, and we're not going to do what I was telling people to do. And you're paying us to provide upgradability and support for the length of the storage cluster. And that was the total cost of ownership play. And when it came out that we were done and it was a no longer thing, it took a step back, and I was like, I get it. I'm not going to change it. I know that I have to go have these conversations, and I have, and some of them have been easier than others. But there's light in the fact that Ceph is open source, and the technology is still there. At the core, a Ceph cluster can be upgraded to another Ceph cluster, and another technology is going to be able to bring in that crush map, as long as that core code is the same and everything is kept in check there. And I think there's longevity of support within Ceph and the community. And I still think that when you target exabyte level of data, zettabyte, exabyte level of data, you get into the point where you have to do these data center wide clusters of disks that all work together to make sure that you're not going to lose anything. and you're getting it to a point where it's cost efficient. You're getting that raw to usable ratio up. So Ceph, in my opinion, is still the only thing and the only technology that can do that and continue in perpetuity to expand. However, SUSE's response and SUSE's direction is now within the Longhorn. There's an open source Longhorn project in which the Rancher Labs and Kubernetes run across. And do not mistake my words in the sense that the Longhorn is not a replacement to SUSE Ceph and SUSE Enterprise Storage, because it is not a deep storage solution. It is not a archive storage solution. It is not a 12.9 type of reliability and resiliency solution. So in that sense, we have we don't have a direct replacement. We have what we're doing with Kubernetes and the storage behind each of those nodes using as part of your cluster. However, on the long term, I don't know if SUSE is going to do another archival play, or if they're going to rejoin the Ceph community in a product of that nature, because there's intrinsic value and total cost of ownership and what I saw and what I was preaching and taking my sysadmin in my role and if I was an executive, I would like, this makes sense, especially for this one target type of storage. And then I started broadcasting that, and they took that away. So one, I'm upset. Two, the switching gears is not going to be a replacement to SUSE Ceph. Longhorn is not. Longhorn is going to be a Kubernetes cluster, containerization, local storage, and it's going to be resilient across multiple locations in data centers if that's where your hardware is. If it's multi-cloud and you have hardware in each of those clouds, then it can persist across those kind of seamlessly. So it's more of cloud native apps. That's the general direction in which we're headed. If that's not clear enough and bright enough for the storage guy on the team here and me to start looking, whatever, I don't know. No, I'm happy. I love SUSE. I love the Rancher Labs acquisition. I love talking about microservices and doing what we can do. The first architecture I was involved with out of college was Turner Millennium and the healthcare information and technology company based here in Kansas City. I worked there for 7.5 years, and the way the Millennium architecture is set up is kind of set up in a service oriented microservice entity, except it was never geared and constrained and alienated to be efficient code base. It was more one huge executable that did a major thing. And there's a bunch of those major things that all did and worked together and communicated. And it was really cool for its time. But even then, I think the re-architecture and what you can do in cloud native applications, especially with containerization, taking all those components of your application and what its core purpose is, splitting it up into different things, and then feeding the number of containers running to suffice the number of users based on load to a system. You can't go wrong when you're looking at paying for hardware in different data centers, right? If you're spinning it up at different times of the night and running your code then and getting cheap CPU, perfect. Like there's people out there that run those Bitcoin miners that sit there, and as soon as that price at Amazon dips below a certain clock cycle and price point, they'll spin up a container, or a million containers, all running this code, all doing the mining. And then the minute it ticks up and it gets a penny more expensive, it'll shut them all down. And that's kind of the general direction a lot of organizations are doing. Obviously, new development, the new guys coming out of the top institutions are going to be Kubernetes and containerization and microservices oriented. That's kind of the next best thing. And it's one of those things that's here and it's going to be here for a while. So you guys should take a look at it. I know this is kind of like, I was the storage guy. Now I'm the Kubernetes container guy. I'm an engineer. I'm, like I said, I was a storage sales engineer. Then I became a partner sales engineer. I'm an engineer by trade. I've been a software engineer. I've been a software architect, been a system architect. I've been a Linux engineer. My favorite hat and my favorite title is still dad. But I will tell you, like, I'm an engineer by trade, and the Kubernetes and the microservices, everything, it makes sense, especially when you're looking at taking a single piece of hardware in your data center. And maybe it is as simple as taking that one Windows server that has to be there, that one Linux server that has to be there, and virtualizing it and putting it in an individual container. And when it's called upon, it wakes up and boom, it uses the resources on that bare metal server. And then all of a sudden you're reducing in your data center, you're reducing that 2U right there of that one server, that other 1U server that was running that Windows application. And you can all of a sudden spin them up and do them at different points of time. Like, I know organizations have servers, whether Windows, whether they're Linux distribution of SUSE, Red Hat, CentOS, whatever you want, doesn't matter. You can spin it down, spin it up as needed. You can get it right prior to need, and boom, you're good to go. And that's the play. That's kind of where we're at in SUSE. We'll always be core Linux. We'll always have the management side of it, and that's what Patrick Schwartz, who was here with us last time, spoke and talked about Suma. He had some difficulties with his demo, but SUSE Manager is one of those unique things too, where configuration management, it's an introduction to it, and especially for people wanting to get into continuous automation and continuous deployment and getting in specific cycles and having weekly deployments, you can get through and use some configuration management. And with SUSE Manager comes Salt, and you can set all that up in Salt to manage all your different Linux infrastructure. So SUSE Manager isn't, for a single server. Anytime you get to more than one or two and they're kind of like for like, you're doing the same operating system, and you start looking at having users who can access which users, who can access which one. Oh, I'm getting some reverb.
Yeah, we're hearing that too.
How do you mute anonymous guy? He keeps popping up.
I don't know if anonymous would be, there he goes. He's muted.
I'm seeing conflicting information. The grid says that Anonymous Coward is muted, but the participants list says not so, and as well as for several other users.
Hey, I'm sorry. I was reading Chip's comment right there. Was there another one? Hey, Gary.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, and I should have been checking the chat room myself. I'm sorry I didn't. So
Yeah. And so whoever just was speaking, who asked the question, can you ask that question again? I'm sorry. I did not hear it.
that was Stanford Baldwin. He was pointing out that echoing situation. There were a number of people who had left their microphones open, but that's been resolved. Everybody is now muted, except for you and myself at the moment.
Perfect. Perfect.
Actually,
Thank
what
you.
I was saying, Gary, is that they are muted in the grid, but the indicator in the participants list does not show that they are muted. So I don't know what the problem is.
Huh.
They all look
Anybody
muted
got
to me.
better knowledge of Zoom who can explain that?
I know it's not running on SUSE.
Bump.
So yeah, so the containerization, the microservices, that play is going to be huge. People are going to adopt it. Chip mentioned another vendor, Seth vendor Croit in the chat. Dennis Nuja, the guy he spoke with, is actually a former SUSE employee. He's a colleague of mine, and I had a good chat. And the minute he called me, I was like, hey, congratulations on taking that customer away from me. And it was completely knowing that what SUSE did was like not good for where I was with all my customers. And I do express that disappointment. I hurt and I was mad, and I put 2 years of my life and my technology career into it. And so there is that. So I will say that if there are any questions on Ceph and how its inability to be performant is good, whatever we can talk about, great. If not, the containerization thing is key. And I think I had left it with wanting to know who is getting into setting up kind of microservices or splitting up a core component or breaking down an application or wanting to get into containerization. So are there any people out there, and can you give an example of what you're trying to do?
I had a question about containerization. This is Stan Baldwin. Because you said if there's one Windows machine that you absolutely need or whatever, and I thought that containers, I'm used to virtual machines and I'm trying to understand containers, and I thought containers were just multiple replications of the host operating system.
Absolutely. And so when I talk about switching gears, if you have a host that does a nightly backup job, so it's a Windows server that runs a backup of some sort, right? You can simply replace that by a container that it spins up, runs the backup thing, and then spins down. And then you're not using idle CPU, you're not using physical infrastructure, because if that monolithic application is still running on hardware from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it may be, you can run that in such a minute capability or even change the code in which you're doing it to make it applicable in a containerization and a microservices way. So I'm not saying like for like spinning up Windows hardware and booting up Windows, waiting for it to come up, logging in and then taking care of the task. No, I'm talking about figuring out this and that in your data center, containerization, making it a microservice, spinning it up and down, only executing when you need it to. If it's
But
a
I
24
keep misunderstanding you and making it sound like you can have a data center that's running Linux and just spin up a Windows container on a Linux host to do this rare task.
Yeah, there are believe it or not, there's a ton of advancements of running Windows on Linux. I can create a KVM on my Linux laptop here and run off of a Windows ISO and boot it on Linux. So yeah, absolutely, it's possible to even do it as from a virtualization step of running the entire Windows server and running it 24/7, not scaling down the time in which you're actually using the OS and everything else is idle, but only running it 24/7. You could run that on a Linux host. And especially if it is on older hardware and smaller, it has a smaller CPU and memory footprint, that's a great way to start shrinking your hardware, shrinking your power need, shrinking everything that's expensive about old hardware.
Hey, Michael, quick question. This is Lee.
Hey, Lee.
I did that 3 or 4 years ago with SQL Server, and I found out that you can't run a Windows program on a Linux host. It has to be a version built for the host. For example, Microsoft published a SQL Server container, which I used with no problem, but I couldn't build my own on a Linux host. It has to be built on a Windows machine for, it has to be basically cross-compiled. Is that changed?
Well, as far as the licensing and however
Not licensing, I mean physically. I could not build a SQL Server container unless I had a Windows host to build it on.
yeah, that's changed. Yeah, you can do SQL Server on Linux, no worries.
No, what I'm saying is, can you build a SQL Server container on Linux?
Yes.
Okay, because that's changed then. Okay, thanks.
Unless I'm like you're making me nervous. I'm pretty sure that's one of the things that's available on Amazon's AWS in the cloud.
Right, but what I'm saying is you can get a SQL Server container, but it's built for Linux by Microsoft. You can't just pull a SQL Server install program down and build a Windows container with it, because a Windows container OS did not run on Linux when I looked into it 3 years ago.
Correct. So there's a slight clarification there I want to make, and you're exactly right. You cannot take a SQL Server ISO and run it in a containerized way. However, SQL Server has done the containerization module, and they have containerized their code, and now you can create a SQL or an instance of SQL Server in a containerized fashion.
Yeah, I think Stanford was getting the impression you grab a Windows ISO off the shelf and run it in a container on Linux. But the answer to that is no then, but you can get them pre-built.
I mean, you could do it, but that's counterintuitive of what we're trying to accomplish, right?
Yeah, the whole idea of running a container is to run just the service in the container, not 500 gig worth of overhead junk that you don't need.
Yep. Is it the script Go, the programming language, right? That's the one that you code, and then any necessary include files that you have, it packages it up and includes it. That's kind of what you're looking at in a bare minimum, kind of what a container is, and what a juice or just enough operating system is. You package that up and you put just enough out there, and it's such a small component, you can control it and you can monitor it and you can do a lot of major things with it on infrastructure across a data center or whatever. But
yeah, I just wanted to expand on the microservice concept, because it took me a couple of years to wrap my mind around it. The whole idea of a microservice is to build only what you need in a container that can run on your platform only when needed, which is totally different from a couple minutes ago. I think Stanford got the impression you could grab a Windows Server ISO, drop it in a container, and run on a Linux machine. Well, while that might be possible, that's totally opposite of the goal of building a container.
Exactly. And taking that core application that uses 100% of that CPU and then just running that in a VM in a virtualized world, or taking it in the cloud and expecting to get it better performant. No, like there's still going to be the constraints of the application and what it's actually doing. So yeah, that's a great point. And it's an interesting concept, because that the goal with containerization and microservices is being able to run it at scale and having components. So for instance, if you're looking at a commercial website, you have a Apache web service, right? You have a shopping cart, you have a payment system, you have probably a update to security, whatever other services you have, ad services, whatever you have. Each one of those, depending on how you are able to intrinsically code it and create a microservice, you can then scale it. And when you get at, Amazon or Google or Facebook or any of these geographically dispersed worldwide global companies that have these web pages and these applications and everything, you can save tremendous amounts of money by setting it up in these microservices and then scaling it appropriately on the hardware. Now, that makes sense for people that have web businesses and are Amazon. That's not you and I. I look at it, how can it impact us? I look at it at that cost per CPU cycle. And if you have tasks, if you guys are running data on servers that doesn't necessarily need to be running 24/7, but can, and you're actually paying for that physical hardware and you have it running, great. If it's time to migrate that, and you can create it where it'll spin up when that CPU cycle and that container and that thing in the cloud that you're paying for is at the price you want, opposed to what you're paying now with power and hardware support past, the 5-year typical life cycle of that venture. And you get into these situations and you can do that. And with containerization, you can have it spin up. You can have it set to launch in the cloud, have a Linux kernel with SUSE Linux Enterprise run, and it can take care of your task, whether that's mine Bitcoin, whether that's run a backup task that we were talking about, migrating monolithic applications and services to different tasks, or to whatever. But you can make better use of your hardware. You can fully utilize all of the hardware. Obviously, we don't want to snowball our applications and have the ill effects of user error and user problems. But there's methods in what SUSE is and what we're doing with the Rancher Labs and how we're positioning it. And while that move is completely separate of the Ceph move, it only makes sense that, like, we're leaving it behind. And I get it. It's one of those things. I'm really excited about Rancher Labs and Kubernetes and the containerization thing, because it's a fun thing to speak to. But yeah, what other questions do we have, guys?
All right, one more on Ceph, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I understand they banned it as a commercial product, but they're still using Ceph with SLES, right? In other words, if you've got a SLES infrastructure and you want to build a Ceph storage cluster, all you do is put up X number of SLES machines and then use Ceph on top of them, right?
Absolutely. And SUSE would support the Linux operating system behind those servers. However, any of the Ceph code and any of that running outside of any Ceph support through SUSE would kind of be null and void.
Okay.
But absolutely, I would love for you guys to continue to use SUSE Linux Enterprise as your Linux distribution of choice. And maybe this is the best time to remind everyone, especially with the CentOS conversation that has gone on. There's a couple of things I want to point out on that. One, the 16 free licenses that they're giving you, or subscriptions that Red Hat and IBM or whoever is giving you, is for one physical host. They all have to be 16 virtual hosts running on that physical host. So keep that in mind. And then the other thing I want to say is our OpenSUSE Leap. And Jonathan, thanks for running Zoom tonight on OpenSUSE. I am as well. But OpenSUSE Leap is a free distribution available, and there is a core component, how it's being managed at the same point of SUSE Linux Enterprise. And so the Leap version 15 is the same as the SUSE Linux Enterprise version 15, with the differential of SUSE supporting our enterprise product. But and knowing that they're pretty close, you can at any point flip it over. So especially at the level where we're at and we're coding and doing something, and we download a SUSE Linux Enterprise, and all of a sudden developers are on it, and boom, all of a sudden we have this new web application and it's ready for production, and with boom, oh wait, we want Linux Enterprise support on it. You can switch it and then pay for it at day one. So it's kind of unique. You don't have to pay for it, but we're there for support when you need it, kind of thing. And keep that in mind, especially as everyone is migrating off of CentOS, hopefully.
So give me the pitch for Rancher. Why should I use it if I'm thinking about getting into the Kubernetes space? Kubernetes.
If you're getting into Kubernetes, you're not our customer. If you are using Kubernetes, then you are our customer. We're not there yet. Obviously, like, we're professional services and stuff, and I'm sure in the future we'll offer the help and the engineering resources behind taking and coding and transitioning those monolithic applications. But for now, we're just the Rancher Labs orchestrator and management of Kubernetes clusters. And that is the one thing that separates Rancher Labs and RKE from everyone else trying to do what we're doing. Is Rancher will you can orchestrate a cluster, you can pull in any CNCF certified Kubernetes cluster and management appropriately, so you can get hooks into the performance of those servers. You can manage the change control and operating systems. You can update accordingly. You can patch. You can do everything from what you can do in a single Kubernetes cluster, but you can management it scale across multi-cloud, multi-solutions. So when we're looking at large scale enterprise applications that need a web server that's 100% uptime, you have to be running that in multiple clouds. All those containers, all that stuff has to be managed, and you have to have a overall viewpoint of that. That's what Rancher Labs does. The ability to control many different Kubernetes clusters, because that Kubernetes clusters in Azure is going to be different than the one running in AWS, different than the one in Google Cloud. It might be the same version of Kubernetes. You might have different different application codes running in different data centers to see how it's working in the production environment. You can do all that, and Rancher Labs is the thing that envelops and manages it and overlooks an entire enterprise's Kubernetes clusters.
In that vein, Michael, I did a 15.2 install a couple last week, and I noticed that there was an option for Kubernetes cluster and a Kubernetes node. When will a Rancher node or option be available on an install, or how would we play with it?
So my recommendation for everyone on this call, if you're interested in Rancher Labs, is to check out the Rancher Academy, academy.rancher.com. I'm currently in the testing phase. I just went through the course. My test is tomorrow. And you can go through and you can learn a lot about Kubernetes, what Rancher does, the management of it, security behind it, everything that is Rancher. And it's actually in a fun course by two guys that really make it easy to listen to. And it's set up in a 5-week agenda. So I think maybe 2 or 3 hours a week is all you need. And then in the end, there's a pretty lengthy quiz and test that certifies you. I think that's an avenue. But to install it, the install process is pretty easy. It's unique in the sense that you go out and you run a curl to run pull down a script from Rancher. Again, we're talking about security and two-factor authentication and pulling a script from a web server that you hope is the right one and not verifying MD5 sums and all that. There's things to whatever.
Just type
Rancher,
it directly into a shell. Nothing could go wrong.
exactly. So we bought Rancher. We're making it enterprise. It's going to be cool. I'm excited to continue to be a part of SUSE. I still consider myself lucky. One, lucky I'm still here with the storage thing, but two, just lucky to be part of the open source company that SUSE is. So the last thing I guess I will tell you guys is I planted a tree in Madagascar. And I know this is a big penguin community. I saw that what is next Tuesday is World Penguin Day. Gary, is that correct?
I think so. Let's see. Stan, do you remember?
It was on the calendar.
And Stan probably put it there, I bet.
All right. Well,
Anyway.
anyways, as penguins are important to the SLUG, this St. Louis Linux user group, chameleons are important to SUSE. And SUSE had every employee plant a tree in Madagascar. Again, it's a virtual thing, but basically SUSE wrote a big check and we all got to plant a tree in Madagascar. And the trees we planted are all native to the chameleon. And therefore, we are working on the habitat and replenishing it. So our chameleon, our precious little chameleon, is around for generations. But I will say, and this is probably kind of a teaser for next time. There is a plushie. You guys know our little chameleon plushie?
Yes.
The little green guy. There is a half blue bull, half green chameleon plushie now. So with the Rancher Labs acquisition, and they did a half green, half blue thing, and everything as far as marketing and what our logo looks like and how we're branded and everything we'll follow suit. But that's really the update of SUSE. And I will publicly apologize to the group, especially to Chip, who I was working with directly with the Ceph stuff. um, just to kind of save some sort of technical tail in the move and still trust in SUSE. We're a bunch of great guys, and we do some great things, and we can help you guys do what you need to do. And I've said it publicly. I'll say it again, and I've said it to my customers. Like, I'm disappointed with the move in Ceph. I think that there was a lot of long-term archival type of storage opportunities available. And I think that we just didn't execute and didn't work out for the best. So I apologize for that, Chip. I know you probably hate me, and maybe Essen's a little relieved to not have to deal with SUSE anymore, but who knows? I'm
Yeah.
here. You guys shall want me back. I will forever come back to the St. Louis Linux user group and go from there. But that's all I got, guys, unless you have something for me.
I think we probably have a few more questions in those areas, but I do want to ask Chip because one of my initial questions earlier this evening was, okay, what's SUSE's recommendation to where do we go rather than depending on SUSE storage? And so Chip has obviously had to address that rather short term here. And it looks like he found a vendor, and he mentioned in chat here that he's willing to say a few words here about it. So Chip, what did you came up with? Kreut, is that the way that's pronounced?
Yeah, Kreut we're going forward with. Let me just start off by saying Michael is the reason we got into Ceph. He certainly led us down a really good path. He was supportive all the way through this, and I would not hesitate to do business with him again. SUSE is a very large company, and large companies tend to make decisions way up at the top and don't really talk to the people down below on what's this really going to do. But because it's Ceph, one of the reasons I got pulled in to go into a Ceph was when I first started looking at it after talking to Michael over a year ago, I guess, was I got onto the user mailing lists. And Ceph has one of the most active storage user groups I have ever seen on mailing lists. And I've been following storage mailing lists for well over 20 years. It's kind of been my life in computing. It's something around storage. And Ceph is definitely the most vibrant community I've ever encountered. And when kind of had a kind of sour taste response from the SUSE salespeople earlier this week, and kind of made it clear that, yeah, they really don't want to deal with this. So I kind of put a Hail Mary post out on the Ceph users mailing list, and the response was phenomenal. I got help offerings from numerous directions. I still owe half a dozen people emails explaining where I've gone, because I could have spent a whole day just responding to people of they're out there to offer help. And one of the key things that happened right away was a couple of people recommended Kreut, and Kreut contacted me directly and set up a demo, kind of an impromptu demo. I wouldn't say really a demo, but just talking through what they're doing and showing me how. And it worked out really well. It was built up, and it was.
Chip, something's garbling your microphone all of a sudden. Chip, you still with us?
Yeah.
Okay, I heard the yeah.
Hey, Chip, I've had similar problems with Zoom. You might want to go into your audio settings and play with the microphone level and do test speakers. Sometimes that'll clear it up. and make sure your microphone auto level is on. You can turn it off and set the volume and then turn it on, and it will basically help the background noise.
I don't know.
Hey, Gary, he said he's got a internet issue, local internet. He's working on it.
Okay, good. Okay.
He said he can try to dial in.
All right. Well, it's good to know, though, that as he was saying, that the Chef users are such an active community that they have a good response online there. And it sounded like
hey Gary, while we're waiting for Chip to rejoin or get a better connection.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned earlier, Dennis Nuja, the guy that left SUSE when we stopped the storage thing, he went to Croit, and it's a unique application. He spent 10 minutes telling me exactly what they do, and it's a better product than what SUSE Enterprise Storage is. You spin it up, you pixie boot, you don't have a local OS, you have all your disks, and you are up within 30 minutes. It's self-aware. It pixie boots out across. All your nodes are up and online, finds your applicable disks, puts them in the cluster, and then boom, you're off and running. And that's what Croit does. And I know Chip was impressed with it. The message he sent me was very flattering of Croit, and maybe Chip can come back and detail exactly what he's learned from Croit, and maybe that's the avenue and the solution. I do know from a business perspective, there is going to be some sort of a path forward for those SUSE Enterprise Storage customers that we have. And maybe that will be extended support through a third party. Maybe that'll be extended support through SUSE. Maybe that will be just sending them all over to Croit like this. I don't know. I just know that the end of life for SUSE Enterprise Storage 7 is January 31st, 2031. And
Hey, Michael, would you have a direct contact for Chip? He said he was looking for an audio dial-in. I put the invite in chat, but I don't know if he can still see it.
I do not have.
I just got back in. I'm dialed in. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you must be on the Verizon network.
Yeah, Gary.
So out in far West County, St. Louis, they don't have enough internet bandwidth, and in the evenings, our uplink goes bad really quickly.
Wow.
I usually can't get video across Zoom a lot either. So thank you AT&T.
Oh wow.
Where are you located?
Wildwood.
Oh.
On the west side of Wildwood, I should say. You know, out where it starts turning rural.
Yeah, that's where you need to go to HughesNet or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I missed what Michael was talking about as I was trying to dial in because my audio was in and out then. But what I was saying when things were cut out was the Ceph community is key in why this is continuing to work for us. We were able to make a pivot inside of a day simply because it was Ceph. And any other commercial storage product is not going to be that easy to do. We chose to rebuild the cluster because we hadn't done anything but some testing on it at this point and had no real data on it. But even if we had real data on it, it could have simply been imported into another flavor of or another distribution of Ceph. But Ceph has all the pieces we need as far as managing large collections of files. We deal in petabytes, and a lot of clustered file systems weren't built for dealing with that on a long-term scale. They look at it more as a scratch storage when it's a clustered file system, and Ceph doesn't look at it that way. We've run BGFS, and we still run BGFS. It's a great scratch file system, but don't trust it to keep your data forever. It won't. I'm here tonight because I wanted to learn more about Rancher. We do a lot of containers. Michael's been great to work with. I'd work with him again.
All right. Good. It's been good to hear about your experience making the transition, though. So, but yeah, we do have some more questions about Rancher. I think a number of folks here do. And one of the questions I have is I'm not yet good conceptualizing where the different players are and who the different players are here. For instance, I mean, there's Google Kubernetes Engine, there's Azure Kubernetes Services, there's, who did I leave out here? Google, Azure, AWS has Fargate. So are these all just managing within their own service, and then the additional advantage to Rancher is that you can do that management across the services? You can manage both in Google and in Azure and in Amazon. Is that what I'm to gather here?
Correct. And it doesn't even have to be in different cloud data centers. It could be your own data centers, whatever. It could be across your hyper-converged hardware and running all different places. However, with the cost benefit of the different clouds and everything, and the ability to scale things up and down as quickly and easily as you can with what those services are and offer, it makes sense to navigate in that direction, right?
Mhm.
I hope I kind of expressed, and I hope I kind of piqued the curiosity on containerization and how you do things. I hope there's more interest. There's a lot of things that we can talk to. I'd love to whiteboard with you guys. I would love to talk through what you're doing on an individual basis. I'm available. I'm in the same time zone, so we don't have to get confused on when we're scheduling. But shoot me an email, mcarrington@SUSE.com, and we can set up some time to talk, whether it's how I'm going to ever make this up to chip, or why the anchovies on the Italian pizza that we have at our St. Louis Linux users group is phenomenal, and why we need to wear masks and get back to in-person meetings, because I'm missing out on that pizza. But no, in all seriousness, guys, like, SUSE is an engineering group. I'm an engineer. I've done some cool things. I have a kind of a fun brain. We can look at what we can do, talk through. We can whiteboard. We can do whatever we want to do. Just
Well,
want to talk about.
how is Rancher positioned either now or when you guys bought them? I mean, I'm kind of the understanding that Rancher kind of is a head-to-head competitor against OpenShift, and then how is that well compared to like Docker Enterprises or Cisco's container platform? Or I mean, are these all roughly the same type thing, or are they tailored a little differently? You know, What's the potential customer that you guys are aiming at with Rancher?
So Gary, do you remember my get off the treadmill speech on storage silos and how these vendors will get you to purchase something and then in 5 years you have to rip and replace?
Okay.
That's how some of the different Kubernetes licensing and stuff um, transpires. And depending on what is affordable or free, or cost advantageous, or even giving you as the guy writing the checks the ability to go shop around which Kubernetes distribution you want to use, that's great. The thing that, and to get to answer your question, the thing that separates what Rancher Labs does and what OpenShift does is we do exactly what OpenShift does, but we can manage that OpenShift CNCF Kubernetes distribution as well as any of the other ones you mentioned all in one portal. And the other applications and everyone else isn't doing that. And where we're at is ahead of where they've just gotten as far as this technology and this deployment and this management, um, this control of it, this kind of puppeteering of your hardware, I guess. I don't know, but
Hey,
yeah,
Michael.
that's what separates Rancher from the other OpenShifts and of the world. And somebody else was chiming in. What's going on?
Yeah, on Rancher, I just started the course, and the course says you have to have bare metal, but I see Rancher VMs available elsewhere. It looks like Rancher is a standalone platform. Is that and is the bare metal requirement just the fact that you have to start from a boot sector, or is there something weird about it running on hardware?
So nothing weird running it on hardware. You're actually very early on in the course, and it will shortly tell you that for production and kind of enterprise level of installations, yes, bare metal, absolutely for your Kubernetes and containerization. For dev and playing around and demoing and dinking and sandboxing, absolutely, we can orchestrate that in containers and run it locally and not have it on bare metal. So there's a little bit of having been on the software engineering side of the fence and now the system engineering side of the fence. There's a little bit of system engineers saying, our stuff's going to run there, right?
Okay. And Rancher OS, when you say it talks to any cluster, how about talking to a bare metal machine with 100 containers on it? In other words, it's not built as a cluster; it's just discrete containers.
So you're thinking more of like a configuration management, and that is not what Rancher Labs does, but that's what SUSE Manager does, which is based on the open source project Salt, which is which was one of the main configuration utilities. And if you're looking to control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bare metal servers that are all different Linux distributions, you can. And you can do that through SUSE Enterprise Manager or SUMA.
Is that available with OpenSUSE, or how does that work?
It's available on SUSE.com on the products page. You can download it and get a 60-day trial. There's probably some research you want to do ahead of time. YouTube's a great resource for SUSE Manager, or just Google it and find it. But the trial, and the reason I mentioned the 60-day period, it starts from the day you download it. So if you're just getting your feet wet with it, you might want to play around with it or use whatever email address you have or whatever. But know that your 60-day trial is for support, and that support would be through me, in which I would help you through whatever you need to do, and learning how to configure and control those servers remotely is one of those. So yeah, if you're interested in that, absolutely, SUSE can help you with that.
At the end of 60 days, I understand the support goes away, but can we still pull updates in it?
You can't pull SUSE updates. So your access to scc.suse.com and on that subscription key will be invalidated. However, it's not going to shut down what you're running. You just won't have upgradability and support from it from then on.
Bummer. Okay.
However,
Go
if
ahead.
the value is there and you want support on that and upgradability through the various versions of SUSE Enterprise Manager, then absolutely we can get you in contact and you can pay for that support. And it's not great. It's not a lot with SUSE Manager, especially on small scale. But you'll learn, especially if you look at like a containerization world where keys and stuff and testing and whatever you want to do can kind of make 60 days work over and over again, if you catch my drift.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking, so far, my partner has been around for a while, and he went off to another gig, so I've been playing with the stuff that we built. And we've got, I don't know, 50 or 60 containers around here, and I'm just looking for a way to manage them in terms of having two hosts, and if I want to take one host down for some reason, they'll all automatically move to the other host or vice versa, type of thing. I'm just wondering if there's a solution there that would be beneficial to us.
That's absolutely what Rancher does and can help you with that.
Okay.
So yeah, let's shoot me an email. I'll get you in touch. I'm able to speak to Rancher in the elevator pitch and what I've talked about. When we get to the demoing and everything, I haven't passed my official Rancher Academy Labs exam demo guy. As a sales engineer within Rancher, you have to go through and present the demo to their directors of the sales engineer and everyone that's basically passed the test that's available. And it's kind of this, you get drilled with these questions and then you got to know your stuff to be able to present and do the demos and stuff. So I still have yet to do that. My initiation, I guess we call that, is commencing, but I'll soon be able to demo it. But like I said, if you want to send me an email, I'll get you in touch with the right resource to talk to you guys or specifics about what we were talking about just there. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Not to cut anybody else off, but jump in after I make this little comment. I just wanted to point out Wendell had posted, Wendell Barber, he said, I installed Rancher OS in a VM on a free NAS box. Then I run a Docker container within it. I installed a Unify controller within it. I got a couple of questions on that. So is Rancher OS, is that how they refer to, so they refer to it as being an OS then?
So, yeah, that's what I mean by bare metal install, Gary.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, Rancher OS is not operating system as that would allude to. The Rancher guys, and we're having, especially being SUSE Linux Enterprise, and having that distribution at our beck and call, are having to convince the Rancher people to now lead with their preferred distribution of Linux as SUSE Linux Enterprise, right? But Rancher Labs is Linux agnostic. Like I said, that Google Kubernetes cluster that's running in the Google Cloud, and the reason you're running Google Kubernetes is because they're giving you a discount on it over Amazon's Kubernetes distribution. So you have it available there, and you're running it and need the management of it. And that's where Rancher Labs comes in.
Okay. Okay. And a unify controller. I'm not familiar with that either. Is that something outside the realm of Rancher, I presume?
Yeah, it sounds like just an individual container that he's running that runs the unified controller. That might be an IoT box or something, but it might be an individual switch or a controller box.
It's probably the unified controller for Ubiquity that you have to manage their Wi-Fi network.
It's running off the FreeNAS box.
Say again, Wendell?
It's running off the FreeNAS box.
Okay.
That's the hardware, but Unify is the Ubiquity management tool, right?
Say what?
Isn't Unify the Ubiquity hardware management tool?
Yeah.
I think that's what Gary was asking. Yeah, Unify isn't anything cloud or Rancher. It's an application you're running to talk to Ubiquity hardware, right?
Yeah, it's talking to the Ubiquity access point.
Right. Gary, does that answer your question?
Gotcha. Yep. Cool. Okay. Okay. And Jonathan Drews, I think we mentioned, I think Michael was tickled that you also are running Zoom on OpenSUSE. So you made Michael's evening.
Yes, thank you. Go SUSE.
Well, everybody's thinking, and I certainly encourage you to think of more questions to ask here. But I will point out that if you look in the chat, back around 7:09 in the chat, Stan posted something that we should have said during the announcements, and that is it's that time of year when there are elections. We have an election for our Board of Governors. We also have some recommendations on who should be the officers of this organization. You can vote on all of that. There is a ballot. The URL for the ballot and the instructions are in that post that Stan put out there at 7:09. And basically the rules for voting is if you came to any of the STLLUG meetings in the calendar year of 2020, if you were at any 2 meetings during that calendar year, you're eligible to vote. So if you'd like to vote, print yourself off a ballot and send it in. And you have basically until, Lee, do you remember, is it the 30, what is this month? This is February. So what, you have to have it in during the month of February?
I had to be here before SteerCom in March.
Has to be here before the SteerCom meeting in March, which is usually the first Monday in March. So, and as Stan says, vote early, vote often. And it really carries your vote a lot farther if there's a $5 bill that's sent along with the vote. So yes, we do not necessarily have to follow federal election laws. So,
Sounds a lot like a presidential election this year.
Yeah, who's providing the voting machines?
Speaking of machines, as Lee was pointing out, there's all the excitement about the Mars rover landing today, and there's late breaking news. This just came in. They have the rover has found life on Mars, and is sending back something.
What?
I'm gonna send something,
They're
share the
not
screen.
even doing tests for a couple. They're not even going to do any exploring or anything for a couple of weeks.
I think this is a joke, Gary.
Yeah, they're setting up. All they're doing now is setting up infrastructure. They haven't even got the high gain antenna working yet.
Here's that picture that the rover just sent back of life on Mars.
Yeah.
And if you zoom in, you realize the picture is Gary before he shaved his beard. Perhaps before he grew his beard.
Oh my.
Poor Bernie.
Can you send me a copy of that, Gary?
I will. Yep. And that was Steve who asked for that, right?
No, Norman Miller.
Oh, okay. I'll send it to both of you. Okay, more questions to the point here.
Does SUSE have any certifications I could pursue?
Absolutely. As far as Linux, SUSE Manager, and any of our products, we do offer different levels of certifications. The one that I mentioned earlier, as far as Rancher was concerned, is Academy, the Rancher Academy. It's academy.rancher.com, and that's actually free. Some of the other courses are available. And then to get the certification, it's a proctored exam in which your company or you pay for I think it's $175 for the person to give the exam. And then once you pass it, you have the official certification. I myself have 2 Linux ones, and I have my 2, well, I used to have these ones that were for storage that mattered, but I don't have, the storage ones, and they're mine. But yeah, no, I helped several people as well study for it and get to the point where they felt comfortable using SUSE and Ceph and everything. And that's kind of what we do. So if you are interested in a certification exam, absolutely check our website, SUSE.com, and you can look at the different Linux level or product level certifications available there.
And I have emailed off to Norm and to Stephen the life on Mars photograph.
Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
I
Thank
still
you,
say
Gary.
it
Thank
looks
you,
like
Gary.
you before you grew the beard, Gary.
Hey, I've just been visiting this planet.
That makes a lot of sense.
Gary,
Yes, sir.
this is Jonathan. Yeah, since we're talking about containers,
Mhm.
what if I interject and tell you about my experience with Shells, the remote Linux desktop?
Sure.
So I'm going to post a link for this. This is not a solicitation. It's just an interesting thing to look at. Shells is basically an online service that you subscribe to, and the rates vary. Right now, I'm paying $5 a month for a Linux computer online. And you log in my Linux computer is located in Dallas, Texas. So I log in through Firefox on my OpenSUSE, but you could do it through a tablet. And I'm impressed because it works pretty good. I've watched several movies over there. There's only minor latency, and LibreOffice works. So you have your choice of Linux distributions. They all seem to be Ubuntu based. So I selected Kubuntu because I have KDE Plasma on my OpenSUSE. But they have GNOME desktops too. So I just thought I'd interject that. It's, since we're talking about containers.
And the whole move towards containers is just such a nice, nice new direction.
Well, I'll say this, Gary, that there are two limitations that maybe you know how to solve. You or Stan or Lee, people more experienced than me, and having a remote desktop, it's hard to hook up a scanner. You know, the flatbed scanners that scan off paper.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to hook up a printer.
That goes for any scanner, printer, computer combination. I don't care what you're doing, it's always a struggle.
Yeah, but this is a remote desktop. I didn't have much problem with YAST on OpenSUSE, getting mine set up. That's the local desktop. But I'm really pleased with shells, and they also offer Microsoft for those people who have a penchant for sadomasochism. I just have to put that little dig in, Gary.
I like it.
Yeah, the only problems I've had is it's a brand new service. I think it came rolled out in January. Brand new company. And the way I got into this was our mutual friend, Robert Sitek, thought it would be a good idea if I investigated cloud computing and got away from the local desktop.
What's the name of the company?
Shells. Did you guys see it in the chat?
I do not.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Hold on, guys. I'm going to send it out again. Okay, there we go. Someone was inquiring about my name. So Shells also has Microsoft Windows you can install. There are some glitches, Gary. I'm having trouble doing updates through the updating mechanism, and they want me to use Debian's apt-get, sudo apt-get update, which I'm not familiar with.
That's
But
yeah,
and
that's
Manjaro.
pretty simple. It's just usually sudo apt install, whatever it is you want installed.
yeah, you were probably absolutely right, Robert.
Why is there a picture of Gary up on the screen?
I think that's Gary without his beard.
That's it. Yep.
That's Marvin the Martian.
Yeah, like we said, Gary.
Well, Marvin's here to ask why we keep littering on his planet. It's like every couple of years, a new piece of junk winds up in his backyard.
Yeah, he has to go through and throw rocks at them until they stop working.
So if I can just close by saying this, all of the major installed applications on my Kubuntu desktop at Shells work. Firefox, Kate, LibreOffice. And the latency of LibreOffice is not bad. So, you can do a lot of text editing.
Now, did everybody get the post in chat? Jonathan just posted the URL to get to Shells. You don't see it.
I see it.
Gary, can I say one other thing in terms of advocacy?
Sure.
I've gone to Lenovo and Newegg. You've heard of Newegg, the computer supplier?
Yes.
And they offer a lot of Linux laptops. Lenovo, not so much. They have about 6 to 8, but at least you can get them pre-installed. Now, I know that System 76 you don't leave out, Gary. But Newegg has a lot of pre-installed Linux laptops.
Okay. Let's see, other comments, points. Have I missed anything? Let's see. Stanford, did you want to ask a question about something about the chat in Zoom? Stanford Baldwin.
Well, I'm guessing that there are 3 or 4 different varieties of Zoom out there that all work differently, because someone's talking about hamburgers and dots and timestamp, and I don't get any of that.
Stanford, it's not that they work differently, it's that each platform has a client that is unique to that platform's UI, or you can run it in the browser. So you've got multiple ways to use the app or a browser, or from a browser.
Yeah, work differently may be the wrong phrase. Each one's got a different UI.
Correct, according to the standards of the platform that it's on. Like on Apple, you got the 3 dots up in the corner. On GNOME, you got a specific type of header. On KDE, you got a different header.
I'm just surprised that Gary says Mac OS is time stamping the chat and mine isn't. And I would have thought that the chat was a direct feed from Zoom itself, not OS dependent.
Well, mine's timestamped.
I'm running it on Ubuntu, and it's time stamped.
Stanford, could it be that you can't see the timestamps for some reason on your client because they're like?
No, we're probably back to what version of Zoom am I running?
What version are you running?
5.0.403652.0509.
That's a good question. I forgot how you check it.
I'm on 5.1.1.
How'd you see that, Gary?
Went up to the zoom.us application name, clicked on it, and under that it says about Zoom.
Oh, so you're using the browser.
Yeah, I'm using an app, not the browser.
Okay, then you don't have Zoom US on an app.
I'm doing it on the Mac OS machine.
Lee, you're running it in a browser?
No.
Yeah, I'm running it in a browser, and I've got timestamps on everything in the chat. I will say this, depending on your monitor, you might not be able to see it because the font that they use for the time hack is probably barely 1 shade darker than the background.
Thank you. You just put your finger on it. You're right. It's the timestamps are there. They're just barely one shade darker than the background.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
Oh, that's very trendy among web programmers. Very, very hot shit trendy.
and
Who
by
needs
the way,
contrast and visibility?
5.3.4 here.
Oh, yeah. Jim, you trying to get a word in edgewise, James Conroy?
Oh yeah, who needs contrast and visibility and usability? Those are all old features for not new hot developers.
Yeah.
Much less a font that is 2 sizes bigger. The freaking app doesn't obey the system font size.
Why would you do that?
Because I don't have to use a stupid magnifying glass.
You know, that's probably racist doing it obeying the thing.
Okay, I'm going to back in the old days, we were doing this in the restaurant. We could sit around all night and just chit chat, and I certainly encourage that. And I've always said we usually learn more stuff out of the chit chat over a beer and a pizza than we do in the formal presentation. No offense to our speaker this evening, but
Let's stop recording before we start that.
but before we